Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. I am Alyson Griffin, and I'm the head of marketing at State Farm. It is a pleasure to be here, and I hope that this next, I think it's 35 minutes, is amazing for you. So test me on that afterward. I am super excited to be here, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to speak for a few minutes first and tell you a little bit about how we're thinking about Gen Z and the power of influencers. And then I'm going to invite and have the pleasure of my longtime colleague and friend, Kimberly Jones. So she's here in the front. She's going to come up, and then we'll dive a little deeper in a Q&A about some of these topics, okay? So I want to let you know that I am so fortunate to manage a brand like State Farm. But it is over 100 years old, and it's in the insurance category. Oh my God. None of you think about insurance ever if you can help it, and I know it. Let alone the Gen Zs and this tsunami of wallets that's coming and going to hit all of our brands in the next several years. So I'm going to try a little something. Like a good neighbor. Yes, thank you. So we're not starting from zero, you've shown. Our brand is known, but our brand is not necessarily loved and known by the younger audiences, and we know that that matters very much. And for us, it's not because we're selling products to them today. We are working on that target audience in the form of generating future demand. We know that the minute those young folks are off the parents' payroll and they need to make a decision to buy insurance, we want them to have fond love and respect and care for our brand so that they at least consider it. So it matters very much even though they're not a current customer of ours. So enter Jake from State Farm. He is a fan favorite, I'll tell you that. Thank you. We've worked really hard over a really long period of time, almost 15 years to cultivate that brand. So Kimberly and I will probably talk a little bit about what that means here in a few minutes. I won't waste time right this second. But it's taken a long time for us to cement him. And one of the things we did in the context of Gen Z and influencers was to create Jake Talk. And we did that because we wanted to create a community around Gen Z influencers with our brand. And we're very fortunate. Jake from State Farm, it's not a cartoon, not a caricature. He personifies what it means to be a good neighbor. He's not a salesman. He never sells insurance. You guys check me on that. He doesn't. But he's out there doing good neighbor stuff on TikTok and personifying who we are as a brand so that younger generations can connect to him. And it's not only what he does and how he acts, but it's what he looks like. He's got khakis and a red shirt and our logo. And so anywhere in the world, you could have no sound on, you could be scrolling, you could be viewing. If you see that asset, we're trying to make sure that Gen Z thinks of us. Sound off, Gen Z thinks of us. So just sharing with you that there are multiple ways you can use your assets, message, look, title, etc. And with Jake Talk, we grew his community to over 1.1 now million followers organically. We don't have any paid media behind his TikTok. He's just a guy who acts like a Gen Z, who shares content and is creating a community. And that to me was one of the coolest things that I've seen evolve over the last 2 years. Okay, so building a community around Jake was one way, but another thing was to endemically put him in situations where we were already prolifically advertising. So sports. Any of you in here who watch sports? I apologize, you can't get away from anyone in my category. It's not just State Farm, it's all of us. And we're there. So one of the pieces of advice that I have is for you is if you know for sure you're in a certain kind of media, then create that storytelling with celebrities or people who are endemic to that. So Patrick Mahomes, Coach Reed, Travis Kelce, they're in our current spots this year. Chris Paul is in basketball. Caitlin Clark we just signed here for women's basketball. Did you guys see the Kinect crossover event? That was amazing. Almost 56,000 people watched college women's basketball this last weekend. Amazing. But it's putting yourself in the spots with stories that are endemic to where you're advertising with people who are from that spot. So gaming is the other place where we do that with real gamers. So that's another place. Another thing we do is meet customers where they are. So we don't expect any customer, no matter their age, to come to us. Again, nobody cares about insurance. Nobody, zero. And so for us, we have to put our brand where they already are, and especially with the younger crowd, where their dopamine is firing and excitement is happening. So gaming, metaverse, all those kinds of places that they already are spending time. We're trying to figure out how our logo shows up, how Jake from State Farm shows up, how our mnemonic, right? So Like a Good Neighbor, State Farm is there, I'm not going to sing it, has a song set to it. By the way, that jingle, created in 1971 by Barry Manilow. Little fun fact, if that's trivia, you'll win. Anyway, so we do lots of things with sound, visual, and our assets in real world and virtual spaces. And then we put Jake, the actor, Jake from State Farm, in the real world. We had him last year, they were 1 week apart. TwitchCon, he joined, and I'm gonna lovingly say, I have 2 boys, 22 and 20, so I can say this. Lovable nerds, the boys, gamers, we're at TwitchCon. Jake is swarmed. There was an hour wait to take a picture with him. I do not understand why anyone would wait and take a picture with an insurance character, but they did. But 1 week later, we put Jake at BravoCon. 50-year-old women were lined up to take a picture with Jake from State Farm. It's like, what is going on? So thinking about where your assets can show up online and in the real world is a really, really good idea. And be creative and clever. You'd be surprised at what you might find if you start paying attention to where they can show up. Okay, so then the Super Bowl. The other piece of advice I have is you don't have to play the same playbook every time. So 3 years in a row, we did something different with the Super Bowl. 3 years ago, we had give me feedback, the Drake from State Farm Super Bowl ad. Maybe some of you saw it. That really catapulted Jake from State Farm. In fact, for any creatives in the audience, the brief for that, I'm not kidding, it was 3 words. Make Jake famous. Not kidding, and that's what they did, Drake from State Farm. And it really put this Jake on the map. But then the next year, we decided that Jake Talk had just started, and we didn't want to put a big emphasis around the Super Bowl on linear television. We wanted to build this Gen Z community around TikTok. So we did a TikTok challenge. As wildly successful as Drake from State Farm was, it could have been pretty obvious that the very next year we just do another Super Bowl linear television ad. We did not. And it really helped us grow our presence on TikTok. And then this year, you may know that we happen to have stadium naming rights. So I'm not going to spend money on a 30 or 60-second spot on linear television. I had 4 hours on television. State Farm Stadium in Arizona is where the game was. It was talked about for weeks. So we were like, well, we're not going to do a television ad. As great as Drake was, that didn't make sense. We leaned into the fact that we had stadium naming rights, and we did another TikTok, but slightly different, with the biggest TikToker in the world, Khaby Lame. And I'll share with you, the Super Bowl had 110 million viewers. Rihanna had 118, by the way. But the Super Bowl had 110 million views. That TikTok, 220 million views and engagement. So we're like, huh, okay. So I don't know what we're going to do this next year, but the point is we're not going to just do what we did before. We're going to stop, we're going to think about the assets that we have in play, think about the business needs that we had, and then make a decision about how to dial up or dial down our assets. And I challenge you to do that as well. Okay, so that leads us to, I'm going to call her Mama Maotto. Mama Kelsey, Donna Kelsey. So several weeks back, you may have heard that, I don't know, Taylor Swift was at a football game watching Travis Kelsey and the Chiefs. Hey, it was a Chiefs game and Patrick's my guy. So I was pretty excited about that. But we acted swiftly on that cultural moment. Thank you for laughing. I love you. We acted swiftly and we decided that Jason Kelsey, Travis's brother, needed a famous person sitting with his mom. And who better than Jake from State Farm? So the very next week, Jake from State Farm and Donna were sitting at the Eagles game, and that was lightning in a bottle. I'm sure Kimberly and I are going to talk about that one too. But so the idea is also, like, sort of the wisdom was jump on a cultural moment if you can, act quickly. These things do not, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is probably one of the top 5, right? They don't happen very often. And so when you have the opportunity, have the intestinal fortitude to try to figure out what you could do to make a moment a cultural lightning in a bottle. So that was a fun one for us. And so I'll conclude my little upfront part here to say that Gen Z matters, it matters to us, and it matters to all of you. Whether you're selling to that audience today or not, they are undeniably one of the biggest generations to ever populate this country. And they are a tsunami of wallets coming for every single one of our brands or your clients or partners. And therefore, understanding them, using the power of influencers, which I know Kimberly and I are going to dig deep into, matters. And again, whether you're selling them today or not. So think about that audience, think about influencers, and Kimberly, I'm going to give you a minute to come on up here. Thank you.